In the beginning, Urum, the goddess of all things, rose naked from chaos, but found nothing substantial for her feet to rest upon, and therefore divided the sea from the sky, dancing lonely upon its waves. She danced towards the south, and the wind, set in motion behind her, seemed something new and apart, with which to begin a work of creation. Wheeling about, she caught hold of this north wind, rubbed it between her hands, and behold, the great serpent Ophion. Urum danced to worm herself, wildly and more wildly, until Ophion, grown lustful, coiled about those divine limbs and was moved to couple with her. Now the north wind, who is also called Boreas, fertilizes, which is why mares often turn their hind quarters to the wind and breed foals without aid of a stallion. So Urum was likewise got with child B. Next she assumed the form of a dove, brooding on the waves, and in due process of time laid the universal egg. At her bidding, Ophion coiled 7 times about this egg, until it hatched and split in two. Out tumbled all things that exist, her children, sun, moon, planets, stars, the earth, and its mountains and rivers, its trees, herbs, and living creatures. Urum and Ophion made their home upon Mount Olympus, where he vexed her by claiming to be the author of the universe. Forthwith she bruised his head with her heel, kicked out his teeth, and banished him to the dark caves below the earth. What a wonderful woman. Next, the goddess created the 7 planetary powers, setting a Titaness and a Titan over each. Thea and Hyperon for the sun, Phoebe and Atlas for the moon, Dion and Crus for the planet Mars, Metis and Cous for the planet Mercury, Themis and Urim for the planet Jupiter, Tethys and Oceanus for Venus, Rhea and Kronos for the planet Saturn. But the first man was Pelasgus, ancestor of the Pelasgians. He sprang from the soil of Arcadia, followed by certain others, whom he taught to make cups and feed upon acorns, and sew pigskin tunics such as poor folk still wear in Abia and Phocis. In this archaic religious system there were as yet neither gods nor priests, but only universal goddesses and priestesses, women being the dominant sex, and man her frightened victim, like the Black Widow. Fatherhood was not tormented. Fatherhood was not honored. Conception being attributed to the wind, the eating of beans, or the accidental swallowing of an insect. Inheritance was materialinal, and snakes were regarded as incarnations of the dead. Urum, wide wandering, was the goddess's title as the visible moon. Her Sumerian name was Ahu, exalted dove, a title which later passed to Jehovah as the creator. It was as a dove that Marduk symbolically sliced her in two at the Babylonian Spring Festival when he inaugurated the New World Order. Yeah, that Marduk, he was not a very nice person. I hear he was also Amun-Ra, so that might have been a person. I'll tell you why later. Ophion or Boreas is the serpent Demiurge of Hebrew and Egyptian myth. In earlier Mediterranean art, the goddess is constantly shown in his company, the earth-born Pelasgians, whose claim seems to have been that they sprang from Othion's teeth, were originally perhaps the Neolithic painted ware people. They reached the mainland of Greece from Palestine about 3500 BC, and the early Hellenes, emigrants from Asia Minor by the way of the Cyclades, found them in occupation of the Peloponnese 700 years later. But Pelasgians became loosely applied to all Hellenic inhabitants of Greece. Thus, Euripides, quoted by Strabo, records that the Pelestians adopted the name Danaans on the coming to Argos and of Danas. Pelestians adopted the name Danaans on the coming to Argos of Danas and his 50 daughters. Strictures on their licensed conduct, Herodotus 137, refer probably to the pre-Hellenic custom of erotic orgies. Oh, wow. Strabo says in the same passage that those who lived near Athens were known as Pelargi, storks. Pelargi, storks. Perhaps this was their totem bird. Titans, lords, and titanesses had their counterparts in early Babylonian and Palestinian astrology, where they were deities ruling the 7 days of the sacred planetary week, and may have been introduced by the Canaanite or Hittite colony which settled the Isthmus of Corinth early in the 2nd millennium BC, or even by the early Helots. But when the Titan cult was abolished in Greece, and the 7-day week ceased to figure in the official calendar, their number was quoted as 12 by authors. Was quoted as 12 by some authors, probably to make them correspond to the signs of the zodiac. Hesiod, Apollodorus, Stephanus, and Byzantine, or Stephanus of Byzantine, can't get my little guy to work. Okay. Pausanias and others give inconsistent lists of their names. In Babylonian myth, the planetary rulers of the week, namely Samas, Sin, Nergal, Bel, Beltis, and Ninib, were all male, except Beltis, the love goddess. In the Germanic week, which the Celts had borrowed from the Eastern Mediterranean, Sunday, Tuesday, and Friday were ruled by Titanesses, as opposed to Titans. To judge from the divine status of Aurelius' pair of daughters and sons. And the myth of Niobe, it was decided, when the system first reached pre-Hellenic Greece of Palestine, a pair of Titanesses, with each Titan as a means of safeguarding the goddess's interests. But before long, the 14 were reduced to a mixed company of 7. The planetary powers were as follows: Sun for illumination, Moon for enchantment, Mars for growth, Mercury for wisdom, Jupiter for law, Venus for love, Saturn for peace. Classical Greek astrologers confirmed with the Babylonians and awarded the planets to Hellas, Selene, Ares, Hermes, or Apollo, Zeus, Aphrodite, Kronos, whose Latin equivalents given above still named the French, Italian, and Spanish weeks. In the end, mythically speaking, Zeus swallowed the Titans, including his earlier self. Since the Jews of Jerusalem worshipped a transcendent God composed of all the planetary powers of the week, a theory symbolized in the 7-branched candlestick and in the 7 pillars of wisdom. The 7 planetary pillars set up near the horse's tomb at Sparta were said by Pausanias to be adored in ancient fashion, and may have been connected with the Egyptian rites introduced by the Pelestians. Herodotus 57. Whether the Jews borrowed the theory from the Egyptians or counterwise, it is uncertain. I think it's the Egyptians had it first. I've read that before anyway, that the Israelites took the religion from the Egyptians. Everything that Jesus says in the New Testament, Thoth says in the Emerald Tablets. So, I mean, it's just crazy, really, when you think about it. One bronze statuette of this god was found in Tolosa in Spain, another in Byblos in Phoenicia, and a marble stele from Marseilles displays 6 planetary busts, one full-length figure of Hermes, who is given greatest prominence in these statuettes. that's thought, presumably as the inventor of astronomy. At Rome, Jupiter was similarly claimed to be a transcendent god by Quintus Valerius Serranus, though the week was not observed there, as it was in Marseilles, Byblos, and probably Tortosa. But planetary powers were never allowed to influence the official Olympian cult, being regarded as un-Greek, Herodotus 131, and therefore unpatriotic. Aristophanes, Piece 403, makes Tertullus say the moon and the old villain, the sun, are hatching a plot to betray Greece into the hands of the Persian barbarians. Pausanias' statement that Pelasgus was the first of men records the continuance of Neolithic culture in Arcadia in classical times. The Homeric and Orphic creation myths. Some say all gods and all living creatures originated in the stream of Oceanus, which girdles the world, and that Tethys was the mother of all of his children. But the Orphics say the black-winged night, a goddess of whom even Zeus stands in awe, was courted by the wind and laid a single egg in the womb of darkness, and that Eros, whom some call Phanes, was hatched from this egg and set the universe in motion. Eros was double-sexed and golden-winged, and having 4 heads, sometimes roared like a bull or a lion, sometimes hissed like a serpent, or bleated like a ram. Night, who named him Ericopius or Progenitus or Protenius, Phaethon, lived in a cave with him, displaying herself in triad, night, order, and justice. Before this cave sat inescapable Mother Rhea, playing on a brazen drum and compelling men's attention to the oracles of the goddess. Phanes created earth, sky, sun, and moon. But the triple goddess ruled the universe until her scepter passed to Uranus. Okay, so Phanes ruled the universe until her scepter passed to Uranus, and Kronos replaced Uranus. So kind of feel like maybe we're getting somewhere. Homer's myth is a version of the Plustian creation story. Since Tethys reigned over the sea like Uranum, and Oceanus girdled the universe like Ophion, the Orphic myth is another version, but influenced by late mystical doctrine of love, Eros, and theories about proper relations of the sexes. Night's silver egg means the moon, silver being the lunar metal, as Ericopius, feeder upon heather. The love god Phanes, revealer, is a loudly buzzed celestial bee, son of the great goddess. The beehive was studied as an ideal republic and confirmed the myth of the Golden Age, when honey dropped from the trees. Rhea's brazen drum was beaten to prevent bees from swarming in the wrong place and to ward off evil influences, like the bull roars used in the mysteries. As Phaethon, Progenus, firstborn shiner, Phanes is the sun, which the Orphics made a symbol of illumination, and his 4 heads correspond with the symbolic beasts of the 4 seasons. According to Macrobus, the oracle of Colophon identified his Phanes with the summer transcendent god Io, Zeus, ram, spring, Hellas, lion, summer, Hades, snake, winter, Dionysus, bull, New Year. A lot of these names are really tough. Night's scepter passed to Uranus with the advent of patriarchalism. Patriarchalism. Never heard that word before, but there it is. Patriarchalism. Patriarchalism. I think. The Olympian creation myth. At the beginning of all things, Mother Earth emerged from chaos and bore her son Uranus as she slept. Gazing down fondly at her from the mountains, he showered fertile rain upon the secret clefts, and she bore grass, flowers, and trees, with the beasts and birds proper to each. This same rain made the rivers flow and filled the hollow places with water, so the lakes and seas came into being. Her first children of semi-human form were the 100-handed giants, Briareus, Gyges, and Catus. Next appeared the 3 wild, one-eyed Cyclops, builders of gigantic walls and master smiths, formerly of Thrace, afterwards of Crete and Lycia, whose sons Odysseus encountered in Sicily. Their names were Brontes, Steropes, and Arges. Their ghosts have dwelt in the caverns of the volcano Etna since Apollo killed them in revenge for the death of Asclepius. The Libyans, however, claim that Quirinus was born before the 100-handed ones, and that, I remember Velikovsky said that giants were 100 hands tall in his Giants essay, so the 100-handed ones, and that when he rose from the plain, he offered Mother Earth a sacrifice of the sweet acorn. This patriarchal myth of Uranus gained official acceptance under the Olympian religious system. Uranus, whose name came to mean the sky, seems to have won his position as first father by being identified with the pastoral god Varuna, one of the Aryan male trinity. But this Greek name is a masculine form of Urana, queen of the mountains, queen of the summer, queen of the winds, queen of the wild oxen. The goddess, in her orgiastic midsummer aspect, they loved orgies. Uranus' marriage, they're just animals, just thrown in a big pile there. Uranus' marriage to Mother Earth records an early Hellenic invasion of northern Greece, which allowed Varuna's people to claim that he had fathered the native tribes he found there, though acknowledging him to be Mother Earth's son, an emendation to the myth, recorded by Apollodorus, is that earth and sky parted in deadly strife, and were then reunited in love. This is mentioned by Euripides and Apollonius Rhodes, Argonautica 494. The deadly strife must refer to the clash between the patriarchal and matriarchal principles which the Hellenic invasions caused. Gyges, earthborn, has another form, Gyges, giant. Yeah, Gyges, remember? Velikovsky talking about it. And giants are associated in myth with the mountains of northern Greece. They're still seeing giants in mountains. There's all kinds of videos of them on YouTube. Briareus, strong, was also called Aegiana, Iliad, 403, and its people may prefer to be Libyo-Thracians, whose goat goddess Aegis gave her name to the Aegean Sea. Catus was the Apianus, name-giving ancestor to the Catians, who worshipped the orgiastic Catito, and spread her worship from Thrace throughout northwestern Europe. These tribes are descended as 100-handed, perhaps because their priestesses were organized in colleges of 50. Like the Danaids and the Nereids, perhaps because the men were organized in war bands of 100, like the early Romans. The Cyclops seem to have been a guild of early Hellenic bronzesmiths. Cyclops means ring-eyed, and they are likely to have been tattooed with concentric rings on their forehead in honor of the sun, the source of their furnace fires. The Thracians continue to tattoo themselves until classical times. Concentric circles are part of the mystery of smithcraft. In order to beat out bulls, helmets, and ritual masks, the smith would guide himself with such circles, described by a compass, around the center of the flat disk on which he was working. The Cyclops were one-eyed also, in the sense that the smiths often shade one eye with a patch against the flying sparks. Later, their identity was forgotten, and the mythographers fancifully placed their ghosts in the caverns of Etna to explain the fire and smoke issued from its crater. A close cultural connection existed between Thrace, Crete, and Lycia. The Cyclops will have been home in all these countries. Early Hellenic culture also spread to Sicily, but it may well be, as Samuel Butler's verse suggested, that the Sicilian composition of the Odyssey explains the Cyclops' presence there. The names Brontes, Steropes, and Arges, thunder, lightning, and brightness, are late inventions. Gramus is the eponymous ancestor of the Libyan Gargantuans, who occupied the oasis of Jado, south of Fessin. I mean, these names are just, I've never seen or heard any of them before. I'm just doing my best. And were conquered by the Roman general Balbus in 19 BC. They are said to have been Cushanite Berber stock, and in the 2nd century AD were subdued by a matrilineal Limta Berbers. Later they fused with the Negro Aboriginals on the south bank of the upper Niger and adopted their language. They survive today in a single village under the name Koromanst. Garmant is derived from the words Gera, man, and T, meaning Gera's state people. Gera seems to be the goddess Ker, or Cure, or Care, who gave her name to the Carians, among other people, and was associated with apiculture. Excellent acorns, a staple food of the ancient world before the introduction of corn, grew in Libya, and the Garmantian settlement of Amman was joined with the northern Greek settlement of Dodona in a religious league, which, according to Sir Flinders Petrie, may have originated as early as the 3rd millennium BC. Both places had an ancient oak oracle. Herodotus describes the Garmantians as a peaceful but very powerful people who cultivated the date palm, grow corn, and herd cattle. The 5 ages of man. Some deny that Prometheus created men, or that any man sprang from the serpent's teeth. They say that Earth bore them spontaneously as the best of her fruits, especially in the soil of Attica, and the Alcamenus was the first man to appear. Comenius was the first man to appear. But Lake Copius in Batia, before the moon even was, he acted as Zeus's consort on the occasion of this quarrel with Hera, and as tutor to Athene while she was still a girl. These men were the so-called Golden Race, subjects of Cronus, who lived with or without cares or labor, eating acorns, wild fruit, and honey that dripped from trees, drinking the milk of sheep and goats, never growing old, dancing, laughing much. Death to them was no more terrible than sleep. They are all gone now, but their spirits survive as genii of happy music, retreats, givers of good fortune, and upholders of justice. Next came a silver race, eaters of bread, likewise divinely created. The men were utterly subject to their mothers, and dared not disobey them. Although they might live to be 100 years old, they were quarrelsome and ignorant, and never sacrificed to the gods, but, at least, did not make war on one another. Zeus destroyed them all. Next came a brazen race, who fell like fruits from the ash trees, and were armed with brazen weapons. They ate flesh as well as bread, and delighted in war, being insolent and pitiless men. Black death has seized them all. The 4th race of man was brazen too, but nobler and more generous, being begotten by the gods on mortal mothers. They fought gloriously in the siege of Thebes, the expedition of the Argonauts and the Trojan War. These became heroes and dwell in the Elysian fields. The fifth race is the present race of iron, unworthy descendants of the fourth. They are degenerate, cruel, unjust, malicious, libidinous, unfellow, treacherous. Some of them words I've never heard before. Unfellow, what does that mean? And treacherous. Number 1. Though the myth of the Golden Age derives eventually from a tradition of tribal subservience and the bee goddess to the bee goddess, one of the first goddesses ever, the savagery of her reign in pre-archaeological times had been forgotten by Hesiod's day, and all that remained was idealistic conviction that men had once lived in harmony together like bees. Hesiod was a small farmer, and the hard life he lived made him morose and pessimistic. The myth of the Silver Race also records matriarchal conditions, such as those surviving in classical times being the Picts, the Moshinicans of the Black Sea, and some tribes in the Belabares, Galacia, and the Gulf of Sirte, under which men were still the despised sex. Though agriculture had been introduced and wars were infrequent, silver is the metal of the moon goddess. The third race were earliest Hellenic invaders. The third race were the earliest Hellenic invaders, Bronze Age herdsmen who adapted the ash tree cult of the goddess and her son Poseidon. The fourth race were the warrior kings of the Mycenaean age. The fifth were the Dorians of the 12th century BC, who used iron weapons and destroyed the Mycenaean civilization. Alcalacomnius, guardian, is a fictitious leader, character, a masculine form, Alcamenes, Athene's title, Iliad, as the guardian of Boeotia. He serves the patriarchal dogma that no women, even a goddess, can be wise without male instruction, and that the moon goddess and the moon itself were late creations of Zeus. I'm going to stop here, but I just wanted to let you know that I'm going to continue reading this book to my Patreons for a few chapters. So if you want to hear more, go on over to Patreon and sign up and you will get more. And that's to let you Patreons know that it's coming as well. I'll have at least one edition a week, or maybe 2. Thank you for listening. I'll see you soon.